Hello there. This is Redshirt Eric from the Crisis team on Geekvolution. Um, I thought maybe it was time for you guys to get to know me a little bit better. I know I'm not on the channel a lot, and some people know me from my own channel, but not a lot of people know me from here. And so I thought the best way to do that would be with some questions from the rest of the Crisis team. Um, So I got each of the Crisis team members to ask me a question, and I'm going to answer them. Lo asks me, what is something you're embarrassed to be a fan of? AKA, guilty pleasure. Uh, I think probably the thing that's my biggest guilty pleasure is the first Dungeons and Dragons movie. I actually like all three of the Dungeons and Dragons movies, but the second and third one aren't actually terrible. They're just really low budget. The first one's pretty moderately budgeted for the time it came out, and it's just one of the worst movies ever made, especially something that was supposed to be a blockbuster release, um, and I can't get enough of it. I can watch that movie any day. If someone wants to watch Dungeons & Dragons, I'm totally down. If somebody hasn't seen Dungeons & Dragons, oh man, you need to see this movie. It's probably my favorite bad movie of all time. Uh, it's certainly not the worst movie, and maybe it's because I'm a D&D guy that, like, on top of it being a terrible movie, it's a bad D&D movie, so, like, I have, like, multiple layers of humor. Uh, but yeah, it's a really terrible movie. It's hard to explain. Like, I genuinely love this film. Um, but I love it because it's bad, so it's kind of hard to explain that to people. So I think that would definitely be like my guilty pleasure, is that is my absolute favorite bad movie. Manos asked me, what film would you like to see made into a comic? And I actually had to think about this. I had so many different answers for things that I think would be really cool to move from film to comic. And the one that I think would be the coolest, and only I would buy. Like, I don't think anybody else would buy it. Like, it would just be for me. Um, I would love to see someone do a series of miniseries that are the Jack Slater films from Last Action Hero. Um, those films are supposed to be such, like, bombastic, cliched, like, action movies that I feel like somebody could have a lot of fun uh, turning, kind of, you get a very little bit of the plot of a couple of them in the films, or in the film. And so I'm sure there's a little bit you could play with there, off of what they said in the film, and I'm sure there's at least one or two of them that they don't give us the plot of at all. So yeah, I would love to see someone do that. I feel like it would be a perfect, just like, over the top, satirical action movie comic book, and I think it'd be a lot of fun. It would only really work if they could get the likenesses to Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like, I feel like if it was just generic muscle guy, it wouldn't be as much fun. They'd have to get Arnold Schwarzenegger's likenesses for the comic. But yeah, I don't know. I think that would be a lot of fun. Cap wants to know who's a director I love that doesn't get enough work. This is probably the easiest question. Uh, because it's got to be John Carpenter. John Carpenter is my favorite director of all time, and he's made one movie in the past 10 years. To be fair, not a particularly well reviewed movie or well regarded film, um, but John Carpenter, back in the 80s and the 70s, he was the master of making films that felt bigger than they were. He made really low budget films, or really moderately budgeted films, that felt as big and as good as anything else. Big Trouble in Little China is certainly a much smaller budgeted film than Indiana Jones, but I don't think it's any less entertaining or even really epic in scope. Well, I mean, Indiana Jones has more locations. Big Trouble in Little China is set in Chinatown, but um, I think The Thing which isn't a particularly large budgeted film, is just as good and looks just as good as Alien. Um, I would love to see what John Carpenter would do in the modern age, where you can kind of do anything. Even with a smaller budget because of special effects, you can kind of do anything. I would love to see John Carpenter just get to let loose in the modern day. I wouldn't be surprised if Marvel tapped him to do a movie. Marvel likes to take people who are kind of past their prime and kickstart their career. I mean, they mostly do it with actors, but I would love to see John Carpenter do a Marvel film. And I'd love to see John Carpenter just do more movies. So yeah, John Carpenter doesn't get enough work because John Carpenter doesn't get work. Um, Roscoe wants to know, what past movie release do you wish you were alive to experience? Um, I feel like my answer is going to be really obvious. I don't want it to feel like a cop out, but it's got to be Star Wars. Um, Star Wars probably more than anything is buried so deeply in my DNA. I have been watching Star Wars since I was a 3-year-old child. Um, and I would love to be there to see the film in its original viewing. I would also love to see just that everyone going in not expecting anything with no hype or anticipation and getting their minds blown. I'm not sure there's ever been a film like that in my lifetime where people had no expectations for it or possibly even openly ridiculed it. They talk about in a lot of the Star Wars documentaries that they'd show trailers and people would make fun of them in the theaters. I can't think of another film, at least not one in my lifetime, that had no expectations and then became kind of the biggest movie of all time. I would love to see that. I would love to see that film with a crowd for the first time. Um, Dan asks me, which version of Green Arrow do I view as the definitive take? Um, my favorite take is certainly the Mike Grell stuff from the 80s. That's kind of who I think of when I think of Green Arrow. But I think the definitive take is probably Kevin Smith's take on Green Arrow. Um, Kevin Smith kind of went back and looked at all of the various versions of the character and takes on the character, um, with Mike Grell's and Dennis O'Neill's and the pre-goatee era, and even the Chuck Dixon stuff where Ollie dies and Connor takes over. He kind of looked at all of that and kind of boiled it all down to a consistent singular character. Because while Dennis O'Neill's Green Arrow was similar to Mike Grell's Green Arrow kind of leans more libertarian, is a little bit more lethal than Dennis O'Neill's. It's a similar character, but it's not the same take on the character. I think Kevin Smith really did a great job of mining all of that material and coming out with a definitive version. So much so that I think the rest of that book, into Brad Meltzer's arc and then Judd Winnick's run, they're all doing that same take as Kevin Smith did. None of them come on the book and radically try to reinvent the character or go, well, I just like the Mike Grell run, so I'm just going to write more of that. They all just kind of seem to agree that Kevin Smith had kind of perfectly synthesized all of the various takes on the character into a singular version. So I would actually say Kevin Smith's Green Arrow is probably the definitive take on the character. And finally, Steve asks, what's something that I hated at first and then came to love? This is probably the hardest question. I really had to think of something. I wanted something that I really, really hated, and then I now really, really love. Not just something that like I saw it and I was like, like that's not particularly good. When I first watched the Blade films, I didn't particularly love them, and now I like the first two Blade films quite a bit. I didn't want something like that. I wanted something that I really, really hated, and now I love. I think probably Nirvana is probably the best example of this. As a teenager, I absolutely hated Nirvana. Um, I just I thought they were really whiny. I didn't like their music, which is really ironic given that, I was a big fan of Linkin Park as a teenager. But I didn't like them. I really, really didn't. I had a friend, we used to make jokes that, Nirvana would make your ears bleed, like it's so bad. And then I'm not sure what happened or even when it happened, but at some point in time, it was like I was just struck by a lightning bolt. And like, I got it. I got what makes the band great. I got what makes the music great. I got their importance and their cultural impact. Um, and that they're, I've come to really appreciate and love that band, for what it was and what it's done. I mean, I don't know any other band that like all of Nirvana's songs are on the radio. Like, there's lots of bands where like, well, almost all bands really, they've got their really popular songs get played on the radio, and then like there's the hardcore fans who are like, well, that stuff's fine, but their really good stuff is on the album. Um, and I certainly have that feeling about a lot of bands. I think every single Nirvana song from all of their albums are played frequently on the radio. I can't think of another band that has that. And it's just, I mean, I'm not saying that like that's the sole reason that like I like them, but like that's I've gained such respect and love for the band. Yeah, that was me answering some questions. So hopefully you guys get to know me a little bit better. This is Redshirt Eric signing off.